On this day the Lord has acted. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Amen. It is so wonderful to have all of you here today in this service. Happy Easter to you and yours. My husband Steve and I have tickets to see the 1970s rock opera, Jesus Christ Superstar, playing at the Good Speed Opera House in East Haddam. I am very excited to see this 1970s rock opera, which I have not seen in years. If you do not know this rock opera, as it's called, really a musical, by the dynamic duo Andrew Lloyd Webber, with lyrics by Tim Rice, or you are, and there are many of you here today, it's wonderful, who are too young to remember growing up with it, here's a brief synopsis of the opera this Easter morn. Jesus Christ Superstar is loosely based on the gospel accounts of the Passion. It follows the events of Jesus' ministry pretty closely, but with some poetic license. It interprets the psychology of Jesus and other characters, with much of the plot centered on Judas, who betrays Jesus, who's very dissatisfied with how Jesus steers his disciples. Contemporary to the 1970s, again, dating myself, it showcases attitudes, sensibilities, and what we used to call slang that reveal its 1970s setting. In short, it's a really fun show. And it is very serious because it hews very closely to the last 3 years of Jesus' life, as told in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those Gospels. Initially, unable to get backing for a stage production, the composers released the score as a concept album in 1970, and was an immediate success which led to its Broadway debut in 1971. And it became wildly successful, though like another opera of its era, Godspell. Not without its critics, both within and outside the church, chiefly because of the focus on Jesus' humanity. In both of those rock operas, Jesus is doubtful, angry, afraid. In other words, just like us, very human. Artistic license is heard pretty often, particularly in the memorable, I don't know how to love him. That's Mary Magdalene, the supposed prostitute, talking about Jesus Christ, her superstar. But my real reservation in Jesus Christ Superstar is not about Mary Magdalene or focusing on Jesus' humanity. What really bothered me then and now about this captivating musical is that there is no resurrection. Say what? No resurrection. That is my issue with Jesus Christ Superstar. I guess that is how Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice understand Jesus. A really good guy, a conflicted man, a Jew, a teacher, who dies a gruesome death on a cross by means of execution. How do you understand Easter and the resurrection? Because it's the critical part of the story, in my opinion. Turn to the cover, all you artists in the congregation, but all of us. Turn to the cover of your service booklet for an artistic understanding of Easter. Cover artist Yarti Sahi grew up in India, where he with others pioneered an Indian Christian art movement, encouraging artistic expressions of Christian themes. His resurrection painting, shown on the cover, is entitled The Sign of Jonas, or The Sign of Jonah, a reference from Matthew's Gospel to the resurrection. First, I notice the outstretched arms of Christ, a pose that deliberately references the crucifixion. Here, though, those extremities are not pinned to a cross, They are utterly open and free, embracing the world in resurrection glory. It's common for artists to hint at the resurrection, hint at the crucifixion in the resurrection. There's a theological reason for that. The crucifixion and resurrection are two sides of the same coin, one great unified event, neither of which can be understood in isolation from the other. My issue with Jesus Christ Superstar, where's the resurrection? Science strengthens this link by including a human figure on each side of Christ. In crucifixion images, these spots are traditionally occupied by the Virgin Mary and the Apostle John. But here the abstracted figures double as two of the Marys at the tomb that we read about if we're in Matthew and Luke's Gospels. They look down to where they had laid the body 2 days ago, but find only that empty stone bench. They have yet to encounter the enormous presence right behind them. Next, I notice the trunk of the tree that runs vertically up the center of the picture plane, almost with Christ, almost alone, one with Christ, whose arms stretch out again like these branches. The tree of life is a common motif in Christian art, a reference to John's vision of heaven in the book of Revelation. It is often integrated into crucifixion imagery to prophesy hope in an otherwise bleak world. But here, the tree shoots forth from the ground in full-fledged resurrection power. Upon further examination, one can see that the branches double as the skeletal structure and gaping mouth of a fish. Christ is being expelled from a giant sea creature, much in the manner of the prophet Jonah. This Jonah can be found painted on the walls of 3rd century catacombs of Rome, where Christians were buried. The association of that Old Testament story of Jonah with the New Testament story of Jesus' resurrection is one Jesus made himself. When the Pharisees asked Jesus for a sign to prove his messiahship, he said that he would give them none except the sign of Jonah. Quote, "For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." As Paul himself later articulated, Jesus' resurrection is bursting forth on the belly of the earth on the 3rd day. And that is how Indian artist Sati Bahi sees and paints resurrection. That's how he understands resurrection. How do you understand resurrection? In my prejudiced opinion, it's the most important part of the story, and we need the whole story. Like Mary Magdalene in today's gospel, we are called to be faithful in the face of grief, injustice, anguish, war that are all around us, even when the world, particularly when the world, is groaning with despair, and even when we cannot recognize Jesus standing right there before our eyes. Remember the end of Matthew's gospel? Where will you be with the sick, the imprisoned, the lonely, the hungry? When we are with these people, we are, in the words of Jesus, there with them. You did this to me. Or as Mother Teresa was wont to say, the gospel on 5 fingers. You did it to me. That's what we're talking about here. For the end is not grief or despair. It's life and hope and immortality. That's the message. That's my issue, though I'm going to see it again with Jesus Christ Superstar. This Easter, my brothers and sisters, our world badly needs to hear this message of hope, redemption, and resurrection. Like us, let us, like Mary, embrace our vocation to proclaim, in spite of the sin and violence and war in the world, that we are resurrection people, and that hope will conquer despair, and love will always reign. May we have the courage and faith to roll away every stone that keeps us from proclaiming resurrection hope and eternal love. On this day, the Lord has acted. Let us rejoice and be so glad in it. Amen.